Hello, I'm Steve Adolph, and welcome to our topic, Epic Stories and Product Management. In this first part, we're going to talk about the INVEST criteria and using that to get stories ready. Now, in our previous topic, we've talked about epic stories and how we could split very large stories we called epics into smaller stories. Now that actually gives us a really interesting opportunity to have a product management strategy of splitting very large stories into smaller ones. What we want to know is what is a good criteria to say that we've got a good small story. Because here's the thing. Part of going into sprint planning or iteration planning is getting stories ready. A good sprint or iteration planning meeting should take a couple of hours at most. We are going to pull stories from our backlog. The team is going to decide if they can commit to it. And finally, we're going to agree to what we're going to deliver to the product owner. The intent here is we're able to deliver nice, thin slices of functionality to the product owner so that we can quickly learn whether we're drifting off into the wasteful red or we're remaining in the valuable green. A problem, though, is if the stories are not ready, if we don't have good stories that bringing into the sprint planning or iteration planning meeting, then our sprint planning meetings can get difficult. And unfortunately, I have been in sprint planning or iteration planning meetings where they've gone on for the whole day and longer because the stories simply weren't ready. That through that whole process of taking the big stories and splitting them into smaller stories, the stories simply still were not ready. So what's a good criteria, or how do we know that a story is ready? Well, a wonderful criteria that is used frequently in the Agile community is this one here, INVEST. And it's kind of cute because we can say invest in good user stories, but it does give us a lovely acronym for what makes a good user story, or what should we be looking for to say that a user story is ready. You know, a user story should be independent, it should be negotiable, it should be valuable, it should be estimable, it should be the size or the right size we say, and it also should be testable. Let's go quickly through these, each of the letters of the term invest. Independent. It simply means that when you implement the story in this sprint, it does not have dependencies on stories in later sprints. Remember, the whole idea here behind Agile and using user stories is each sprint is supposed to deliver a nice thin slice of behavior that a stakeholder or product owner can look at, get feedback, and we can learn what's really valuable so we can stay in the valuable green rather than the wasteful red. Well, if that story has a dependency on another story that's not going to be implemented for a few sprints on, we are not in a position to be able to show off that capability to the stakeholder or the product owner. So independent means the story is not dependent on other stories that are going to be implemented at a later time. Negotiable. If you recall the 3 C's of the user stories, the conversation goes both ways. It's not the product owner or stakeholder dictating to the team what must be done in the story. The story is negotiable. It is a negotiation between the team and the product owner and even the stakeholder, such that we can really discover what is really valuable in the story and what they really need. If you remember, one of the neat things in the story format that we had was we had the as a who, I want what, such that why. That why really can help facilitate that negotiation because a team may be able to come up with easier ways of implementing that stories. We may decide to reprioritize that story. So everything is a negotiation. The story should be negotiable. It's not the product owner dictating to the team. V is for valuable. Okay, well, you might go, well, of course, we're not going to implement something that's not valuable. Well, yeah, think about it. If 65% of what we're doing doesn't contribute value, we want to really ensure that, is this story valuable to somebody? Does it actually contribute value? For example, that's why the format as a who is I want what such that why is so popular, because it's identifying who really gets that value. Is there something valuable here? Can you identify someone who's going to benefit from this story? It's just that if you can't, it's a little bit of a red flag that maybe this isn't quite valuable. Again, there's different circumstances. I don't want to get pedantic about that, but really, I want to look at this. Is the story, what we have here, is valuable? Again, we're trying to avoid that CRUD style story, the create, read, update, delete story. We're trying to use that V there, valuable, to give us that thin slice of functionality to the system. The E, estimatable. This is really important from my point of view when you're going into sprint planning. If you can't put an estimate on the story, if you don't know how big the story is, then you don't know enough about the story. Do not take it into the sprint planning session. This should be the biggest red flag that comes up on whether a story is ready or not. The team can't estimate it, and that means both, well, geez, we don't know how big this is, or you start getting a fight going on by somebody saying it's small, somebody saying it's large. This means you don't have enough information about how big that story really is, and therefore that story is not estimatable. Small or right-sized. Right? This is the whole reason we started talking about epics. We have big stories, they cannot be implemented in a single sprint. We've got to get the stories down to something that could be implemented in a single sprint. So that's what we mean by small. The right-sized here means, well, until these things are really coming up to being implemented as sprint, are they the right size for where they are, their position in the backlog? But definitely small means by the time we're ready to pull these into sprint or iteration planning, this story has to fit or can be implemented in a single iteration or sprint. Testable means we can test this. The story is written such that it is testable. We can write tests for this, and we have the infrastructure to be able to test this. So this is kind of a nice criteria that you can use to look at a story, the resulting story you have, and say, is this story ready? Now, in part 2 of this topic, we'll start looking at strategies that will help us split our big epic stories, such that it gets us closer to creating ready stories.